Howdy, everybody. So this is going to be a short little tidbit, and normally with tidbits, I don't include verse lists, but this time I am going to include a verse list because our passage is kind of lengthy. And so you can read this along with your own Bible. You can download the verse list, whatever you want to do. But we're going to start in Matthew chapter 12 and going to read verses 38 through 42. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah. And behold, a greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. Many times throughout the Bible, we're commanded, He who has ears, let him hear. The word hear implies that you understand what is being said. The word itself literally means the sound of a voice is light into the mind. In other words, listen to the words. At some point when you were a child, your mother might have told you, you hear just fine, but you don't listen. And that's the same idea here. We are to listen and understand. You have to let the light illuminate your mind when the words go in. Now, as we've looked at previously, Jesus will often use plays on words. When Jesus spoke, Matthew wrote down exactly what Jesus said, even if it was technically incorrect grammar or convoluted grammar or words that just weren't very common. Now, the other Gospels tend to summarize the words of Jesus, but Matthew wrote them down precisely. I have a question. Do you know why Saturday and Sunday are so strong? That's because the other days are weekdays. And that's a play on words that you need to listen to what is being said. Or in this case, you can look at what is written and you can sound it out in your head. You have to let it illuminate your mind to understand that this is a play on words between week, as in 7 days, and weak, as in physically not strong. He who has ears, let him hear. Now, one shortcoming that we have in the modern world is that we are often unfamiliar with the underlying text in the Bible. We read translations, but we don't understand that from which is being translated. When I was growing up, we had a preacher, Dr. Wilson, who expounded upon the Bible, including the underlying text. Now, he didn't give a bunch of feel good sermons, but he preached. And as such, I grew up with an appreciation for understanding what was being said in the Bible. So, if you look at our opening passage, what happens when you hear it out loud? We need to hear the words as they're spoken literally. It's an important passage, obviously, and in this short video, we're not going to try to expound upon the entire passage, but I want us to look at a couple of words, and then I want you to open your Bible and reread the passage. This is part of a lengthy study that I'm involved in elsewhere. We will get to it eventually on this channel, but right now I want to share this little tidbit with you. Now, the first word that we're going to look at is the name Jonah. And it says, And there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonah. Well, the word sign is semeion, and it's where we get the English word semantics and semaphore, which we covered a few months ago. Sometimes this word is translated as miracle, but that's incorrect. That's not the correct meaning of this word here. It is sign. Now, a miracle may be a sign, but a sign is not necessarily a miracle. Our focus here is on a sign. So when Jesus says that an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, we need to understand these words in the context. The word evil is ponera, which sounds a lot like pornea, and pornea is fornication. And the word adulterous is moikalis, which sounds a lot like malakois, which is soft or effeminate. Does that sound like today? Now, the word generation is Genea, and Genea is new earth. So do you have these words in your mind? Write them down if you have to. And the word here, but, means if not. And that's what it means in English too, but you have to think these things out in your mind when you read it. But it's if not, which means it describes a potentiality. So to paraphrase this passage, and no sign will actually be given to them if not the sign of Jonah. So are you with me so far on this? Well, the name Jonah is Yonah, which there's not a hard J sound. The hard J sound is modern English. We say Jonah, it's Jonah. The same as with Yeshua becomes Jesus, which becomes Jesus in English. But there was no hard J sound, so it's Yonah. What does that word sound like? Iona. It means ages. So this is the sign into the ages. After our current age, there's the age to come, but we're not the first age. So this is the sign that's into the ages. And remember, it's not miracle, it's a sign. But as Jonah was in the belly of the sea monster, so Jesus will be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. Not part of 3 days and 3 nights, but 3 full days and 3 full nights. And for this, you can see our previous study on Easter for more details on that, but just keep in mind it's 3 full days and 3 full nights. Now, some translations translate this word as fish, some translate it as whale, but either way, many scholars say that Jonah literally could not have survived that. But have you ever heard anybody argue that Jesus was not literally in the heart of the earth? A few Hindus or Buddhists, maybe, but as in Christian circles, they don't argue that Jesus was not literally in the heart of the earth, but they say that Jonah wasn't literally in the heart or the belly of the fish. Where your heart is, there's your treasure. Now, the word earth is the same as the word sand, which has to do with human infrastructure. He was in the heart of the earth, the hearts of the people. That's where his treasure is. And we're told not to build a house on sand because building a house on sand is relying upon man and not on God. Now it says here that the queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. In this verse, the name Solomon is not spelled in the normal way, which is important. We're not going to look at it right now. You can if you want to, but it's not spelled in the normal way. But why does this say Queen of the South instead of Queen of Sheba? Why does it say uttermost parts of the earth? I mean, after all, where she came from is what we now call Yemen, and it was well known. It wasn't that far away. I mean, Solomon sent people much further away than that. Well, rise up in this context has to do with resurrect. Uttermost parts is the ends of the earth, and that is periton. The word periton is robber. It's where we get the English word pirate, periton. It's deception. It's not outright fighting. You have to hear and you have to listen. Periton, periton. Out of the robbers of the earth to hear the cunning words of Solomon. Now, this wisdom of Solomon, the word for wisdom is the word Sophia, which does mean wisdom. But when Jesus uses the word Sophia, he never uses it in a positive way. Elsewhere, it's used positively. Jesus never uses it in a positive way. So here he's using a negative aspect of the wisdom of Solomon. But here is the word hear again. Hearing implies putting into action. You hear, you understand, you do. So why does it say Queen of the South? Well, directions mean things in the Bible. We've looked at that previously also. But in 2 Chronicles 9:1, we're told that the Queen of Sheba came to prove Solomon because she heard of his fame and she communed all that was in her heart. Well, the Hebrew word for the name Sheba is related to the word oath, and she came to prove Solomon. Prove means to examine or to tempt. Heart is life, and is translated as soul in the New Testament. And here in the Septuagint in this passage, it's translated as suke. It's the same thing as soul. And the word fame is name. We've looked at all this in the past, but in our original passage, we see Queen of the South. That's Basilissa Notu. Well, Balissa Tonu, switch this syllables there, means King Satan not. The Queen of the South shall rise up. King Satan will not rise up. Where did we hear this idea of King Satan before? Matthew 12:24. But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, This fellow doth not cast out devils, but by Beelzebub, the prince or the ruler of the demons. And then verse 26, Jesus says, And if Satan casts out Satan, he's divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? So to reread our original passage with some of these plays on words inserted for you to think about, I'm going to read Matthew 12, verses 38 through 42. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, An evil or fornicating, and an adulterous, or a soft, effeminate generation seeketh after a sign. And there shall no sign be given to it but the sign of the prophet Jonah, or the sign of the ages. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment, and judgment has to do with separation. The men of Nineveh shall rise up with this generation, with this new earth, and they shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of the ages, and behold, a greater than the ages is here. The queen of the south shall rise up. King Satan shall not rise up in the judgment with this generation, with this new earth, and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth. She came to pirate the earth, to hear the wisdom, to hear the cunning of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. Do you have ears to hear? That's the question.